Hey everyone, so by now you should have watched the special right triangles review on how we filled these out, reviewing our special right ratios. I started to use a paper version of the graph and decided that that just wasn't working out. So now I'm going to do it here on the whiteboard. So let's go ahead and grab that 45-45 right triangle that we talked about. And the way we're going to do this, we want to make sure that we're labeling the point that our circle intersects our graph at, and we also want to make sure that we are drawing in the line that the hypotenuse follows, so getting that radius that that point would be at. So now we want to take our triangle and put it at our origin. This would be 0, 0. At our origin. We'll place that there. And so this would intersect right here. Now, we said that since the leg of our triangles are the same, our points are going to match up with our legs because our triangle says that we come from this intersection here of our vertice, and we come over the right way, square root of 2 over 2, and then we go up square root of 2 over 2 to get to this point. So we have square root of 2 over 2, square root of 2 over 2. Now I'm going to grab a different pink because that is clearly not working out. Okay, so I'm going to label this point square root of 2 over 2, square root of 2 over 2. Much better. And then cover in my hypotenuse. So now that is our 45-degree angle, so we want to label it 45 degrees. Now, we're going to do the exact same thing for every side. So when we do this, we're going to flip over our triangle so that we are still getting a 45-degree angle up to that point. Now, just like it was for when we filled out our graph, it's going to be the same here as square root of 2 over 2, square root of 2 over 2 are always going to be our numbers for this 45 right triangle. However, since we go to the left on our x-axis for this one, we have a negative for our first part of that coordinate point. And this is not going to be just 45 degrees anymore. We had our first 45 and then came across the y-axis to this one here. Now you can think of this in two ways, right? We know 45 is halfway between 90. That's why these lines work out so nicely for us. So we would have 45 and 45 to get 90, and another 45 would get us 135. Or you can think of this as 180 minus 45 to go backwards to our point over here. Either way, you would get 135 for the degrees of this angle. Now, the next one, we would flip our triangle this way, still following the leg along the x-axis here. And we know that this would come from our origin up to, still going to be square root of 2 over 2 for both our points. However, we know that the third quadrant is a special one, and both our x and y coordinates need to be negative in order for a point to be in the third quadrant. So we know that that's going to be negative square root of 2 over 2, negative square root of 2 over 2. Last one for 45, and then I can stop saying the square root of 2 over 2, is going to be upside down this way. And you can tell that my circle is not perfect, but that's okay. We can estimate. And we know that this line is going to come from our origin. And since this here was 45 degrees, we know that our numbers, again, are square root of 2 over 2, square root of 2 over 2. However, one of them has to be negative. They can't both have a positive option. And since we are right on the x-axis but down on the y-axis, we know that this needs to be a negative for our y-coordinate. Now, I skipped over the other 2 degrees, so let's go back to that. To go from 180, 45 more degrees would get me 225 degrees. And then same thing here, we can think of this as going backwards from 360, 45 degrees, or we can think of it as going forwards 45 degrees from 270. Either way, you would get 315 degrees for that one. So we've labeled our right triangles for our 45 degrees. Now let's go ahead and do this for our 30-degree ones as well. We're going to follow that same method, taking our triangle. Now for 30 degrees, our point is going to be a little lower. And we said that our units for this one changed a little bit, right? Instead of 2 being our hypotenuse, it's now 1. So we go over the long leg, which we know has a unit of square root of 3 over 2. So that is our x, square root of 3 over 2. And then we come up 1/2. Now we said this was our 30 degrees. So we have 30 degrees right there. Now the next thing we do is we don't want to be putting this along the y-axis. We want to leave this on the x-axis. So now this would come up over here. And we would have, I kind of lost my 90 there, didn't I? Now for this 30-degree angle, this isn't just 30 degrees. Again, we have to figure out what the exact degree measure would be to get this here point. Now, we know that this comes up 30 less degrees, than 180. And 180 minus 30 would give me 150 degrees. Now, for the point of this triangle, we're still coming across the long leg. And so we said the long leg is square root of 3 over 2. And we still come up 1/2. The trick, though, is one of these has to be negative, and we know that since we come left and up, our negative has to be our x part of the coordinate. Now, to get our next triangle, we would flip this down. And so to get 30 more degrees from 180, we would have 210 degrees for that line. And the point here would still be across negative square root of 3 over 2. And since we're again in the third quadrant, we would have a negative 1/2 that we are coming down on our y-axis. Last one for 30 degrees. Last one for 30. Place our point. And come across. Now, we're still going long ways, square root of 3 over 2 and 1/2. But now again, since we went down and to the right this time, our y is our down, so we would have a negative 1/2 there. Final thing we need to do is we need to say how many degrees this would be. And since we are 30 less degrees than 360, we know that this would be 330 degrees. We've got one more triangle to do. We are almost there. We're almost there, ready to fill in that yellow sheet here in just a second. Now, for the last one, we have our 60-30 right triangle. This one's different because now instead of starting from 30 degrees, we're starting from 60. So we would place our 60 degree at the origin. Starting to lose some of my marker spots, but that's okay. Now, for this one, it's basically just the opposite of what our 30 degree was. Now, this time, instead of being square root of 3 over 2 like we had here, our point here is going to be 1/2. We go the short way first, and then square root of 3 over 2 up. We said square root of 3 is bigger than 1 because we know that the square root for 1 is 1, so that means that square root of 3 has to be bigger. You can compare the decimal with that too if you don't believe me. Now, we know that this is our first triangle, so this would be 60 degrees for our degrees on that angle. For the next one, we're just flipping across the y-axis. We're doing our reflection across the y, and we're going to do the same steps. Drawing our line, placing our point. Now, we're going across the short side, and our short side is 1/2. And we're going up our long side, so we have square root of 3 over 2. Now, one of these has to be negative, and since we went to the left and up, we know that our x has to be negative. Now, the trick here comes with what degree measure our leg should be. You can think of this in two ways, right? We have either it's 60 less than 180 or it's 30 more than 90. Either way, you would get that this is 120 degrees. Now, same thing, but on the other side here. We're going to come down from our origin, and we'll have a point here on our 60-30 triangle. And we still went to the left a 1/2. Since we went to the left, that is negative. And now we're going down, so we have square root of 3 over 2, and since it's down, that would be negative. Whoops, there we go. Now, the final thing to do for this leg is to say what the degree measure of it would be. Again, you can think of this as 60 more than 180 or 30 less than 270. Either way, it still comes out to be 240 degrees. Final triangle, we are just about there. Our final triangle here. Wow, this side got really short. That's okay. I'm going to draw in our radius. There we go. And again, our numbers are 1/2 square root of 3 over 2. And the only thing that's negative for this one is our y, because we go right and then down. Last thing to make note of is our degree measures. We know that this is 60 less than 360 or 30 more than 270, which comes out to a nice even 300 degrees. Now we've got a lot of numbers on this here whiteboard of ours. But thankfully, everything is nicely color-coded, and so we can kind of tell the difference. We had our green triangles to be our 60-degree angles. We had our pink triangles to be our 45, and we have our blue angles for being our 30-degree angles. Now, these are all different reference points that we are going to be using once we get started with our trig unit next. We're going to take these numbers, though, and fill them in for our yellow sheet.